My name is Mark McClish. As a law enforcement officer, there may be times when you get into a physical confrontation with a subject. Many times these altercations end up on the ground. Therefore, it is only prudent that every officer learn how to defend himself when fighting on the ground. Jiu-jitsu classes teach some very effective control techniques. However, they usually do not address certain issues relevant to law enforcement, such as de-escalation of force, weapon retention, or placing the subject in a handcuffed position. This video has been designed for the police officer and will cover those areas unique to the field of law enforcement. Before we begin, there are two principles that I want you to remember. The first one is contact equals control. Distance equals escape. The more contact you have with the subject, the more control you will have over him. Give him the slightest gap and you've given him the chance to escape. He may not know how to escape, but you've definitely given him the opportunity to escape. The second principle is never turn your back to your opponent. When fighting on the ground, if you turn away from him, you're very vulnerable to strikes to the back of the head, and you're very vulnerable to the rear choke. So always turn towards your opponent. All right, let's apply some of these principles to some good ground fighting techniques. To avoid the takedown, your very first line of defense is to maintain some distance between you and the subject. This is usually referred to as a reactionary gap because it gives you time to recognize an attack and to take the appropriate action. When a subject does charge at an officer, many times the officer's first reaction is to back up. This is called step and drag. We all had it taught to us in basic training. The step and drag allows you to move and yet maintain a fighting stance. While the step and drag does have application in other areas of defensive tactics, it's a very poor technique to employ when somebody is rushing towards you. Most people can run faster forwards than what you can shuffling backwards. In other words, they're going to get to you, put their arms around you, and take you to the ground. To avoid the takedown, your first reaction should be to step offline. The old adage is, if you're standing on the railroad tracks and the train's coming at you, what are you going to do? You, of course, would jump off the tracks. The same thing applies here. You want to get out of the line of attack by stepping offline to the side. Now, the general rule for movement is whichever direction you're going to step, that's the foot that moves first. If you're moving forward, your lead leg moves first, followed up by the rear leg. If you're stepping to your right, you step the right foot first, followed up with the left foot. Most right-handed officers feel more comfortable stepping offline to their left. To execute this movement, from a good FI fighting stance, field interviewing stance, you can take a slight step with your left foot, followed up with a much larger step with the right foot, stepping offline at a 90-degree angle. As at this point, we employ the step and drag technique, further distancing ourselves from the subject so we can get to our intermediate weapons. I've asked my friend Bob Breyer to help me demonstrate this technique. If you step offline too soon, the subject can change direction or follow your movements. Therefore, it's a last-second technique. And that's the beauty behind it and why it's such an effective technique. The subject is able to close the gap, he's about to put his hands on you, step offline. If you forget to step offline or the subject is skilled at closing the gap, he will be able to get close enough to you to put his hands on you. One of the most common takedown techniques is a high tackle. With a high tackle, the subject is going to place his shoulder into your midsection and wrap his arms around your waist. It's very similar to a football tackle. A mistake that many offenders make is that they will place their head to the side of your body. Take advantage of that and place him in a headlock. Your goal is not necessarily to get him in a chokehold, but simply to control his head. At this point, if you're still standing, execute some knee strikes to his midsection. Because you're holding on to his head, he will not be able to back away, making the strikes even more effective. Keep striking until he becomes incapacitated, disengage, or go to a control technique. Because he's rushing towards you and has momentum, more than likely he's going to be able to take you to the ground. You still want to hold on to his head, but the key here is to control the fall. If you allow him to dump you straight onto your back, you may have the wind knocked out of you, taking the fight out of you also. Therefore, you want to fall to your side, and you want to fall to the side where he has placed his head. As soon as you go down to the ground, roll with the subject, but the key is to bring your top foot on top of him and keep it right here. Remember, contact equals control. If I keep my foot down here, it allows him to bring his left knee over and assume the mounted position. Keep the foot here, roll with him, until you end up on top. Let's try that again. All right, again, he comes in for a high tackle. Boom. Even as you're falling to the ground, get him in that headlock. As you go to the ground, turn your body, fall to the side. Quickly bring that foot over, maintaining control, go to the mounted position. Once you get to the mounted position, we'll talk a little bit later what to do from this position here. If the subject is able to knock you onto your back, again, you want to control the fall. Two things you want to do. One is tuck your chin so the back of your head doesn't hit the mat, and you want to slap out with your free hand. As soon as you hit the ground, place the subject in your guard position. Wrap your legs around him, cross your ankles if you can, but hold on to his head. At this point, give him verbal commands to lie down flat on the mat next to you. If he refuses, we can employ what's called a stretch-out technique. Using your legs, push his body towards your feet. Using your arm, pull his head in this direction. Stretch him out until he complies. At that point, again, good verbal commands to lie down on the ground. Once he lies down, again, the key is to keep your top foot. Don't drop it down here. Keep it on top. Take your time, but assume the back mounted position. Key points to remember with a high tackle is grab his head and control the fall. If you fall to your side, roll with him and go to the rear mounted position. If you fall onto your back, place him in your guard, stretch him out, and then go to the rear mounted position. In an effort to get you to the ground, the subject may execute a low tackle. In this type of attack, you'll have both of his arms wrapped around your legs. Because he's lowered himself, you may not be able to reach down and place him in a headlock. More importantly, because he has your legs, he's going to be able to quickly take you to the ground. Again, your best defense is to control the fall. You want to fall onto your back. If you fall onto your side, he will be able to climb on top of you and take the mounted position. As you fall onto your back, again, remember, tuck your chin to protect the back of the head, but in this case, we can slap out with both hands. Once you hit the ground, quickly place him in your guard. Now, you won't be able to stretch him out. Later on, we'll talk what to do from this position here. Remember, your best defense against a low tackle is to control the fall. Tuck your chin so the back of your head doesn't hit the mat, slap out with both hands, and quickly place the subject in your guard. As a police officer, when dealing with a subject, you should always maintain a field interviewing stance, keeping your gun side back. If the subject should execute a low tackle, this will make it more difficult for him to grab both of your legs. More than likely, he will only be able to grab your lead leg. Again, because he's low to the ground, it will be difficult for you to reach down and grab his neck. You may be able to execute a few strikes to get him to release your leg, but more than likely the two of you are going to go to the ground. Again, your best defense is to control the fall. You want to fall to the side of the leg that he's grabbed. If he grabs your right leg, fall to your right side. If he grabs your left leg, fall to your left side. Once on the ground, bring your free leg over and place him in a scissor lock. Again, contact equals control. Grab his head, give him verbal commands, execute a few strikes if you have to, but as soon as you can, continue to bring his foot across and obtain the mounted position. Remember, with a one-leg takedown, whichever leg he grabs, that's the side you want to fall to. If you grab your left leg and you fall to your right, you will pin your free leg underneath you, and you'll not be able to put him in a scissors lock. If you grab your left leg, fall to your left. If you grab your right leg, fall to your right. Once a subject takes you to the ground, he will probably try to obtain what's called the mounted position. Some people call this the top position. The mounted position is when the subject is sitting on top of you. There's some very good reasons why the subject would want to obtain the mounted position. The mounted position gives the person on top a greater reach advantage. Bob and I are about the same height, but you can see here, I have a significant reach advantage over him. The mounted position also gives the person on top a better angle of impact when striking. That's the difference between a foul ball and a base hit. Bob's blows, because he's punching upwards, are going to be more of a glancing blow. and the person on top has more mobility, and he's punching with gravity. Once the subject climbs on top of you, the first thing you want to think about is escaping from the mounted position. Now, the first technique we're going to execute is what's called the buck. Using our hips, we're going to throw him off of us. Now, if he's seated on our chest, you can see the buck isn't going to be very effective here. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get him seated on our hips. And to do that, you want to squirm forward. Squirm forward and bring your elbows in. By bringing your elbows in, it prevents him from sliding up and sitting on your chest. Also, you want to keep your hands up, protect your face. Now when I buck him, I'm going to get a reaction from him. I'm not going to be able to throw him off of me until I trap one side of his body. I mean, a natural reaction is to stick your arm out to prevent from falling off. So to get him off, we have to trap one side of his body. And to do that, we're going to reach up, grab his wrist. Reach up here, grab his elbow. And at the same time, we're going to hook his foot. It is possible if you don't hook his foot, he could stick his foot out here to prevent us from bucking him off. Now with one side trap, when I arch my hips up, he's going to fall to this trapped side. Let's try that again. Squirm forward, keep the elbows in. Reach across, grab his wrist. Reach up, grab his elbow, hook his foot. Now to buck him off of you, don't try to just buck him over here, but the key is to go straight towards the ceiling. Once you have your hips in the air, you can then turn to the trap side and kind of guide him over here. But he will naturally fall to this side anyways because he can't put his arm out or his leg out to prevent from falling. Roll with him and you'll end up in his guard. And later on we'll talk about what to do from this position. Now it may be, if he's throwing a flurry of punches, it's going to be very difficult to reach up and grab his arm. Well, even as he's throwing punches, we can still buck up to disrupt those punches. Just to get him to put his hand on the mat. We'd rather have his hand on the mat than on our face. But once he puts his hand on the ground, that's your opportunity to trap that arm. So again, as he's throwing punches, buck him up. As soon as he puts his hand on the ground, reach over your head and circle his arm and bring it into your side here. You've essentially just trapped this arm now. We still need to hook the foot and then buck up and take him over. One more time. Again, he's throwing some punches. We can parry a few, but quickly buck up, get him to put his hand on the mat. Reach right past your ear, bring the arm in. Now, as you're practicing this, if your partner has his hand flat on the ground, there's a good chance when you buck him over, you're going to break his hand. So as a safety, palm upward, make a fist. That'll reduce the pressure on the wrist. Still need to hook the foot. Again, buck him straight up towards the ceiling. Roll with him. And again, later on, we'll address what to do from this guard position. Another technique for escaping the mount is what's called the side escape. As the name implies, we're going to turn onto our side. Pull the bottom leg out and wrap it around him. We then turn to the other side, execute the same technique, and place him in our guard. Now, ideally, you want to execute this technique when the subject first climbs on top of you. You can't buck him off of you because he isn't seated on you yet, so think about going to a side escape. If you ever work out with a good jiu-jitsu person, you climb on top of them, you think you have the mount, but you look down and they'll have one leg out wrapped around you. And that's because they've executed a side escape. Even though the subject has mounted us, we can still execute the side escape. Let's say we're going for the buck, and we grab the wrist, we grab the elbow, but we forget to hook the foot. And as we buck him up, he sticks his leg out to prevent the buck. Well, that's your opportunity then to turn onto your side and quickly go to a side escape. I now have half a guard, he's got half a buck. And of course, I want to work on the other side doing the same thing, get my leg out and get him in a side escape. One more time. Once he's on top of you, even if he's fully seated on you, it's very difficult to get your leg out. Therefore, as you turn onto your side, you need to kick your hips out in the opposite direction. Basically, you need to jackknife your body to create a little distance here to get your leg out. Again, the key is to bring the bottom leg out. Wrap it around him, turn to the other side, execute the same technique. So again, to execute the side escape, we're going to turn onto our side, kick our hips out to the opposite side, pull the bottom leg out, wrap it around him. Turn to the other side, execute the same technique. At some point you get a chance, you can incorporate a kick there, allowing you to disengage. Remember, the subject obtains the mounted position. Although there are some control techniques you could do from that position, because he is in such a position of advantage, it's best to execute some type of an escape technique. When he's first climbing on top of you, think about the side escape. Pull a leg out, wrap it around him. Once he attains that mount, go to the buck. After bucking the subject off of you, you will end up in his guard. Or rolling around on the ground, he may place you in his guard. From this position, he can use his legs and pull you forward, wrapping you up. To prevent that, as soon as you end up in his guard, immediately sit back on your heels. Grab his waistband. Remember, contact equals control, so take your elbows, place them on his inner thigh. You can even move one knee towards the center of his buttocks. From this position, even the strongest person, it will be very difficult for them to pull you forward. Now in jiu-jitsu, there are several techniques we can use to pass the guard and obtain the mounted position. But as a law enforcement officer, all we want to do at this point is disengage and get to those intermediate weapons, or perhaps your firearm. So in order to get out of this, we have to get him to open up his legs. His groin, midsection, solar plexus are very vulnerable. Quickly execute several hammer fist strikes here, get him to open up his legs, disengage. So again, as soon as you end up in his guard, quickly sit back, maintain the guard, and then execute several strikes to get him to open up your legs. Now, before you sit back, if he is able to pull you forward, you want to control the fall, you want to pin his arms, grabbing his biceps, and pin his arms to the ground. Use your head, give him a headbutt. Keep your head wedged under his chin, pushing him backwards so he can't wrap you up. Then quickly again, sit up, execute a strike, open up his legs, and disengage. So we're in the guard. We can either sit back, maintain the guard. If he tries to sit up on you to punch you, quickly beat him to the punch, put him right back down. Don't let him sit up on you. Strikes here, or if he pulls you forward, pin his arms to the ground, sit up, give him a strike, disengage. One of the worst positions you can find yourself in is when the subject is seated on your back. You're very vulnerable to strikes to the back of the head as well as a rear choke. Your best defense is not to allow yourself to get into this position. Remember, always turn towards the subject, never turn away from him. However, if you find yourself in this position, there are a few things you can do to effect an escape. First thing you need to do is establish a base. If you just flatten yourself out, you lose your mobility. So establish a base using your elbows, knees, and toes. Bring your elbows in, cup your hands to protect your neck, making it a little bit difficult for him to apply a rear choke. Now, to effect an escape, we're going to execute what's called a sit-out. We're going to bring our bottom leg out from underneath us. In order to do that, we have to disrupt his balance. We're going to raise our right hand forward, bringing our left knee up. Slightly throws him off balance, creates a little gap here, in which we're going to bring our right foot through, sitting out. Turning towards him, always working towards the head. Grab his head, pull him down. He may take the mounted position, but it's better to have him sitting on your chest than to sit on your back. So again, he climbs on your back. Quickly establish a base using your elbows, knees, and toes. Raise your gun hand forward. Bring the opposite knee up. By raising the gun hand forward, it means we're going to, as we turn, our weapon will be against the ground and not right here where he can grab it. We always want to work keeping the gun away from him. So we're here, sliding out, turning towards him, working towards the head. guard is a defensive position when you're on the ground. This is when you're lying on your back with your legs wrapped around the subject. This will prevent him from obtaining the mount. With a good guard, cross your ankles if you can. Remember, contact equals control. The more contact you have with your legs, the more control you will have over him. Your legs should be positioned slightly above his waistline. This will allow you to use your legs to pull him forward. If you let him drop down here, you will lose some of that leverage. So keep him up high. Now, as you throw some punches, we want to pull him forward, wrap him up. Hold on to him tight. Keeping him down here will make it a little bit harder for him to deliver effective strikes than if he's sitting up. Now, a good weapon retention technique is as you pull him forward, slide your gun hand underneath his armpit, wrapping him up. This will make it more difficult for him as he reaches back and grabs your gun. If your arm's just simply around the back of his neck, now he has access to your gun. So keep it under here. Now, to escape from this position, what we want to do is trap both of his hands on one side of his body. To do this, as he throws some punches, you want to parry them and get both of his hands to either left or right side of his body. As soon as you get him over there, wrap him up. Now I can escape out this side because it doesn't have a hand here blocking me. Key point is to keep this leg on top. If I drop the leg down, he can bring his left knee over and assume the mounted position. Keep it here. Give him verbal commands to lie down flat. Slowly take your time, working your way out to that back mounted position. All right, he's throwing some punches. You know, we can parry a few of those, but eventually use your legs, pull him forward, wrap him up. Kick your hips out to the side, keep this leg on top. Now your bottom leg is going to be pinned underneath him, so it may take a while to get it out of there, but take your time, keep working, and attain that back mounted position. Now, even if you're not able to pin both of his hands to one side, he spreads them out as you pull him forward. We can still wrap him up. As we hold on to him, at some point, what you want to do is take his arm and quickly pass it over here, again, allowing you now to escape out this side. As soon as the subject gets in your guard, quickly use your legs and pull him forward before he sits back, and immediately wrap him up. From the guard position, your weapon is very vulnerable. Even if you're a plainclothes officer, your jacket's going to open up, exposing the gun, and the subject may reach down and grab your gun. If he reaches across your body and grabs the gun, immediately apply a C-clamp. Using your hand, forming a C, just grabbing his hand, securing your weapon in the holster. Now recognize what he's just done. He's just placed both hands on one side of his body. So we can execute the same technique we just did. Using our legs, pull him forward and wrap him up. Keep turning your body, taking the gun away from him, but also keeping this leg on top, holding on to his head so he can't get up. Assume that back mounted position. If he reaches across, we'll just go for a wrap up. Now, if he reaches straight down with his left hand and grabs your gun, same thing applies. Always apply that C-clamp, but now we're going to change the technique and go for an arm lock. We're going to take our free hand and come around the back of his arm. And in order to do so, we're going to have to plant our left foot on the ground so we can sit up, reach across the back of his arm, snake it back through, and re-grab our wrist. Now we're going to fall onto our back, resume a good guard position, kick our hips out to the side. We'll give verbal commands for him to lie down flat. If he refuses to comply, we're going to take his arm towards the center of his back until he lies down on the ground. Once he lies down, maintain control of the arm, keep the leg on top, move to that back mounted position. All right, again, we get him in our guard, he reaches down and grabs the gun. Immediately C-clamp. We can plant the foot and sit up, or you may be able to pull him forward so that you can reach across the back of the arm, underneath, re-grab the wrist. Kick your hips out to the side, take his arm towards the center of his back. Very important to keep his arm bent. If he straightens out his arm, that's his defense. You can still execute the technique. You'll just have to take it a little bit further before he complies. Once he complies, quickly move to that back mounted position. Subject reaches down, grabs your gun. immediately C-clamp it. And then it's just a matter of recognizing which hand he's using. If he reaches across his body, go to the wrap-up. If he reaches straight down, go to the arm lock. Another technique we can use from the guard is to place the subject in a headlock. This is the same technique we used in defending ourselves from a high tackle. Using your legs, pull him forward, place him in a headlock. We're now going to stretch him out. Using your legs, push his body backwards, hold on to his head, stretch him out until he complies. Verbal commands to lie down flat on the ground. Assume the back mounted position. And again. Now, to place him in a headlock, you have to have his head to the side of your body. If you pull him forward and just wrap him up like this, you're not going to be able to stretch him out. You have to bring your arm across your chest and then across the back of his neck in order to stretch him out. Let's take a look at this headlock from another angle. As you pull him forward, place his head to the side of your body. Your arm goes around the back of his neck, underneath, grab it onto his head. Again, you're not necessarily trying to get him in a chokehold. You're just positioning his head right here so he can't go anywhere. Using your legs, push his body away from you, stretching him out until he complies with your commands. We can also use this technique in conjunction with the weapon retention. Subject reaches down, grabs your gun, immediately C-clamp that weapon. Plant your left foot on the ground. You sit up and you attempt to execute the arm lock, but he puts his arm in here, blocking you from getting your hand in there. Reach across the back of his neck, place him in a headlock, fall to your back, get him in a good guard position, stretch him out. Verbal commands for him to lie down on the ground. Once he lies down flat, move to that back mounted position. From the guard position, immediately pull the subject forward. Don't let him sit back. Either wrap him up or get him in a headlock. If he's grabbing your gun, immediately C-clamp, and it's a matter of recognizing which hand he's grabbing the gun with and which technique you're going to utilize. Once on the ground, you always want to get to your feet as soon as you can. If you can't, place the subject in your guard or go for the mounted position. Ideally, you like to be mounted on top of his back. Now you have him in a good handcuffing position. However, if the subject stays on his back, you will have to take the mounted position sitting on his chest. To obtain a good mounted position, you want to sit high on his chest. The further back you get on his hips makes you vulnerable to the bucking technique. So stay up high. Keep your knees in, keep your feet in. Contact equals control. Put your chest to his chest. Spread your arms out here to establish a base, also making it more difficult for him to hook your arm and buck you over. Now, once in this position, we can give a few strikes to the subject, give him verbal commands to roll over. A lot of people don't like getting hit in the face. A lot of times they will turn to avoid it. Allow him to turn underneath you. Once he gets on his stomach, tighten up your mount, get his hands behind the back to apply the handcuffs. If the subject refuses to roll over, we can force him to roll over using a good rollover technique. Now, we always want to focus on the hand closest to our gun. If I'm busy tying up this hand, he can reach up and grab my gun. So always focus on the hand closest to your gun. In this case, what we want to do is execute some strikes so he puts his hands up. Now, as you execute these strikes, remember his head is against the ground and it has nowhere to go. So if you execute a straight punch, you could very well injure your hand. Probably best to utilize angled palm heel strikes. Execute these strikes. We're going to take our gun hand, take the hand close to our weapon, and force it across his body. Quickly collapse with your chest on the back of his elbow. Contact equals control. At this point, I'm pinning his arm against my chest so he can't pull it out. Release his wrist with your gun hand and reach under his neck and re-grab his wrist. Now I'm going to take my free hand, put my palm on the back of his elbow. Push and pull at the same time, slowly turning him over. All right, again, obtain a good mounted position, execute a few strikes, force the hand across the body, quickly collapse with your chest and the back of his elbow. Reach underneath his neck, re-grab the wrist, place your palm in the back of his arm, push and pull. Now, if he's a large person and you have to pick your foot up, pick it up, but keep it in close to him. If you stick your foot way out here, he could take his leg, pull it out, and wrap it around you and go to a side escape. So slowly inch your foot out as you turn him over, placing him in a handcuffed position, get his arms behind his back. All right, one more time. Give him some strikes, force the arm over. Another important point is to protect your face, bury your head. If you got your head right here, he's got a free hand, he can reach up, finger jab you in the eyes. Keep it over here, keep it low. Don't let him headbutt you. Push and pull, turn him over, good handcuff position. Once you get that mounted position, give him verbal commands to roll over. Many people will comply, or just a few strikes may force him to roll over. But if he refuses, go to a rollover technique, attacking the hand closest to your gun. Another control technique you can utilize from the mounted position is the arm lock. Again, we're going to be attacking the arm closest to our gun. Instead of taking the arm across his body, as with the rollover technique, we're going to take the arm straight down to the side here, this time using our non-gun hand. As you come across with a palm heel strike, it's important not to grab his arm in a C-clamp manner, but keep your thumb next to your index finger. Take the arm straight down to the ground, quickly plant your elbow right next to his ear. With your gun hand, I'm going to take your hand, slide it under his biceps, re-grab your wrist, again, keeping your thumb next to your index finger. Keep your head buried down. If you got it up here, he's got a free hand. He can jab you in the ribs a few times, and we got control of this subject. But protect your eyes. To gain compliance, you want to lift his elbow off the ground, but keep his hand touching the ground. Slowly drag his knuckles toward the back of your knee until he complies. Now at this point, once he says he gives up, we have to de-escalate. If we just let go of this, the fight may still be back on. So keep a hold of the arm bar, but quickly transfer it to the opposite side of his head, placing your chest on the back of his elbow. And now we're just going to go over and use the rollover technique. So again, we're utilizing the palm heel strikes, boom, boom. We take the hand to the ground, plant the elbow next to his head. Keep your head down, slide your hand under his biceps, re-grab his wrist. Lift the elbow up in the air, drag his knuckles on the ground. Once he complies, quickly take this arm lock to the opposite side of his head, get your chest on the back of his elbow. Gun hand goes underneath his neck, palm on the back of his elbow. Plant your foot if you have to. Slowly turn him over. One more time. Get some strikes. Boom. All right. So, from the mounted position, we have two good control techniques. Always attacking the hand closest to the gun. If we take him this way, we go for the arm lock. If we take him this way, we immediately go to the rollover technique. But remember, always attack the hand closest to your gun. Once you have the subject on his stomach, he may refuse to give you his hands, tucking them underneath his body. You could use a good pain compliance technique such as grinding your elbow into the center of his back until he complies with your commands. Another technique you can use, which only sounds painful, is a lateral head displacement. Again, we're going to attack the hand closest to our gun. Take your left arm, put your elbow right next to his ear. Push his head away and also in an upward direction to your left. This will cause a slight gap to open up underneath his armpit. You're going to reach directly into that armpit, grab his wrist, peel it out, get the arm behind the back, apply the handcuffs. So again, he's got his arms tucked underneath there. You give him verbal commands, put his hands behind his back, he refuses. Arm over here, push the head away and also in an upward direction. If you reach in here and there's not much of a gap, take the head a little further. But reach under the armpit, pull his hand out, get it behind the back, cuff him up. Most people in this position are probably going to comply and give you their hands, but if they refuse to, Think lateral head displacement. In the mounted position, it could happen that the subject reaches up and grabs your gun. Immediately C-clamp his hand and bring your right knee up, pinning his arm between your thigh and your ribs. Then we want to execute strikes to the face, telling him to let go of the weapon. So again, you're in the mounted position. Maybe you're delivering some strikes, but he reaches up, grabs the gun. Immediately C-clamp the weapon, bring your knee up, boom, execute some strikes. Let's go through this one more time. Maybe you're delivering some strikes here. He reaches up, grabs your gun, immediately C-clamp the weapon, bring your knee up, pinning his arm against your thigh and ribs, boom, deliver some strikes. Now, in jiu-jitsu, for every move, there's a counter move. And by bringing your knee up, you're going to lose a little bit of your base. And it could be that he could buck up and take you over to your left. And if you can't prevent that, you're going to have to go with it. As he throws you, quickly wrap your legs around him, place him in your guard. You'd rather be mounted on top of him, but if he grabs your weapon, then your priorities change. You got to C-clamp it, you got to protect the gun, and if he is able to take you over, maintain that C-clamp, but just wrap your legs around him, place him in your guard. Another control technique that a subject may place you in while on the ground is a headlock. One of the most effective headlocks is when the subject places his back on your chest. By placing his back on your chest, the subject's going to attempt to sit on you, taking away your breath, taking away your mobility. You don't want to let him do that, and again, your escape is to always turn towards the subject. Turn towards him so he's not sitting on top of you, but now he's leaning against you. The next thing you want to do is build a frame. Take your top forearm, place it against the side of his neck. With your bottom hand, grab your wrist. Now, if he starts to squeeze on you, you can apply pressure to his neck. It's kind of a standoff here. Now remember, he's leaning against your body. So if we kick our hips away and take away our chest, he'll have nothing to lean against, and he's going to fall onto the ground. Now we're going to scoot around here so you can see what we're doing. Once you roll him onto his back, immediately bring your foot over and then apply pressure to his neck to get him to release the headlock. Slide the arm out, force him onto his stomach, take the back mounted position. When on the ground, the subject goes for a headlock, immediately turn towards him. Don't let him lie on top of you. Build that frame. Apply some pressure there. The key is to quickly kick your hips away, forcing him onto his stomach. Bring the leg over, apply some pressure. Once he releases the headlock, put him on his back. All right, again, the two key points are always turn towards him, build that frame. At least that gives you some time to think about it. He's leaning against you, quickly kick your hips away, roll him onto his back, attain the mounted position. As a police officer, you do not want to go to the ground. Once on the ground, it's very easy to lose track of your weapon. However, many fights do end up on the ground. Therefore, every officer needs to learn some basic fundamentals of ground fighting techniques. Hopefully this video will help you to survive any ground assault.